6 months after the Great Defeat, Jake Morrison stood in a deep underground chamber carved from solid rock. The room was 300 meters below the surface of New Texas, hidden beneath layers of stone and metal that no alien scanner could penetrate. Around him, dozens of people worked on the most important project in human history. The mission to steal the quantum processors from New Montana had been successful. Pete Johnson and his team had managed to break into the alien mining facility and escape with everything Dr. Amy Walsh needed. 3 people were wounded in the escape, but everyone made it out alive. The processors were now part of a massive machine that filled most of the underground chamber. Amy stood next to the machine, checking the connections for the 100th time. Her hands were shaking slightly from exhaustion and nervous energy. She had been working for 18 hours straight to make sure everything was perfect. This machine was her life's work, and humanity's future depended on it working correctly. "Are you sure this will reach every human settlement in the galaxy?" Jake asked. He trusted Amy completely, but the plan seemed almost impossible. They were trying to send a signal across thousands of light years using technology they barely understood. "The quantum transmitters will create a network effect," Amy explained, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Each receiver will automatically boost the signal and send it to the next location. As long as we have human settlements with basic communication equipment, the signal will spread to every corner of human space." But this was not going to be an ordinary message. Jake had decided that words alone were not enough. The resistance needed something more powerful, something more primitive, something that would reach into the deepest part of what it meant to be human. In the corner of the chamber, an old man named Frank Miller was setting up a collection of drums. Frank was 70 years old and had been a musician before the war. He had learned to play the drums as a child from his grandfather, who had served in the military many years ago. The drums were made from metal salvaged from destroyed human ships. "These rhythms are older than space travel," Frank told Jake as he arranged the drums in a circle. "My grandfather's grandfather played them before battles during the old wars on Earth. They were meant to call warriors together and strike fear into the hearts of enemies." Jake nodded. He understood the power of tradition. Even in the age of faster-than-light travel and quantum computers, humans still carried the memories of their ancestors. The drums connected them to thousands of years of human history, to every battle their people had ever fought and won. Roy Price had arrived from New Montana the day before, with news from other resistance cells. The underground movement was growing, stronger, but the different groups were having trouble coordinating their attacks. They needed a way to communicate that the aliens could not intercept or understand. "The Zephyrians monitor all our electronic communications," Roy reported, "but they don't understand human music or cultural traditions. If we can embed tactical information in the drumbeat patterns, we can coordinate attacks across multiple worlds without the aliens knowing what we're planning." Amy had figured out how to do exactly that. The quantum transmitters could carry much more information than simple sound waves. She could layer multiple frequencies into the drumbeat signal, hiding complex data inside what appeared to be primitive music. Claire Dixon was also in the chamber, working on the final calibrations for the transmitter array. She had been traveling between different resistance cells for months, helping to set up receiver stations that could pick up and relay the quantum signal. Every human settlement now had at least one hidden receiver. "All stations are reporting ready," Claire announced from her control panel. "We have confirmation from 47 different worlds and space stations. The network is complete." Jake looked around the chamber at all the people who had worked so hard to make this moment possible. There were miners from New Montana, farmers from New Kansas, engineers from space stations, and soldiers from a dozen different worlds. They had all risked their lives to build this machine and create this network. Frank Miller took his position behind the drums and looked at Jake. "What message do you want me to send?" Jake thought for a moment. The first drumbeat signal would be heard by every human in the galaxy. It needed to say something important, something that would give hope to people who had been hiding and running for months. "Tell them we're still here," Jake said. "Tell them we're still fighting. Tell them we're coming. Frank began to play. The sound started as a simple, steady rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The deep bass notes echoed off the stone walls of the underground chamber. Then Frank added more complex patterns, weaving traditional drum sequences with new rhythms that Amy had designed to carry coded information. Amy watched her control panel as the quantum transmitters picked up the drum beat and converted it into signals that could travel faster than light. The machine hummed quietly as it sent the first human message in 6 months across the galaxy. On New Montana, Pete Johnson was in his hidden tunnel when he heard the drums coming from a small speaker that Claire had installed weeks earlier. He smiled for the first time since the war began. The sound meant that someone, somewhere, was still organizing the resistance. It meant that humans were not giving up. On New Kansas, Danny Brooks was working in his fields when the drum beat reached his farm. He stopped what he was doing and listened to the rhythm. Hidden in the pattern, he could hear tactical information about supply routes and meeting times. But more importantly, he could hear the message of defiance and hope. Across human space, in hidden bases and secret shelters, humans stopped what they were doing and listened to the drums. Some people cried. Some people cheered. Some people just stood quietly and felt their hearts beating in time with the ancient rhythm. The Zephyrians heard the signal too. In their command centers and warships, alien technicians detected the quantum transmissions and tried to figure out what they meant. But to them, it sounded like meaningless noise. They had conquered 17 different species, but they had never encountered anything like human music. Supreme Commander Thexaval was in his flagship orbiting Earth when his communications officer reported the drumbeat signals. The alien leader listened to a recording of the transmission and dismissed it as unimportant. "It is just the death cries of a defeated species," Thexval told his staff. "Ignore it. Focus on extracting more resources from their worlds." But on the remote research station Omega-7, an alien scientist named Dr. Kessitar was not so sure. He had studied human culture before the war and recognized that the drumbeat patterns were too complex to be random. He wrote a report suggesting that the signals might be a form of communication, but his superiors ignored it. The drums played for 3 hours. Frank Miller's hands were bleeding by the time he finished, but he did not stop. He played every traditional rhythm he knew, and many new ones that Amy had taught him. By the end, humans across the galaxy had received detailed information about resistance activities, supply drops, and planned attacks. More importantly, they had received proof that the human spirit was not broken. When the transmission ended, Jake stood in the quiet chamber and felt something he had not felt since the day of the Great Defeat. He felt hope. The galaxy thought humans were extinct, but they were wrong. The drums had proven that humanity was very much alive, and this was just the beginning. The drums never stopped playing. For 3 weeks, the quantum signal continued to broadcast across the galaxy, growing stronger and more complex each day. What had started as simple rhythms from Frank Miller's drums had evolved into something much bigger. Resistance cells on dozens of worlds were adding their own drum beats to the signal, creating a symphony of human defiance that echoed through space. On the occupied world of New Earth, Security Chief Betty Kane crouched in a maintenance tunnel beneath the planet's main spaceport. She was 42 years old and had worked in law enforcement for 20 years before the war. When the Zephyrians conquered New Earth, they thought they could use the existing security systems to control the human population. They made Betty help them by threatening to kill her family. But Betty had been secretly working with the resistance for months. She used her access to the security systems to help humans move around the planet without being detected. She also gathered information about Zephyrian troop movements and supply schedules. Tonight was different. Tonight, Betty was going to lead the biggest resistance operation in the history of New Earth. "All teams report ready," whispered her radio operator, a young man named Kevin Park. He was monitoring communications from 12 different resistance cells spread across the planet. "We have 300 fighters in position." Betty looked at her watch. According to the coded messages hidden in the drumbeat signals, resistance cells on 6 different worlds were going to attack at the same time. The operation had been planned for weeks using the quantum drum network that Dr. Amy Walsh had created. "Remember, we hit hard and fast," Betty told her team through the radio. "The drums will coordinate our timing. When you hear the attack rhythm, move immediately." The Zephyrian garrison on New Earth had grown comfortable over the past 6 months. They had 5,000 troops controlling a planet with 2 million humans. The aliens believed that humans were too scared and disorganized to fight back effectively. They were about to learn how wrong they were. At exactly midnight, the drumbeat signal changed. Frank Miller, broadcasting from his hidden chamber on New Texas, began playing the attack rhythm that he and Amy had developed. The sound was fast and urgent, like the heartbeat of a warrior running into battle. Betty heard the signal and smiled, grimly. "All teams, go now." Across New Earth, resistance fighters emerged from sewers, abandoned buildings, and underground tunnels. They had been preparing for this moment for months. Many of them were not professional soldiers, but they knew their planet better than the alien occupiers did. The attacks were perfectly coordinated. While Betty's team struck the main communications center, other groups attacked the power station, the weapons depot, and the spaceport. The Zephyrians had never faced simultaneous attacks from so many different directions. At the communications center, Betty and her 15 fighters used explosives to blow open the main entrance. The alien guards were caught completely off guard. They had been monitoring human radio frequencies, but they had no idea that the resistance was using the drumbeat signals to coordinate their operations. "Destroy all the communication equipment," Betty ordered as her team spread through the building. "Make sure they can't call for help." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Roy Price was leading his own attack on New Montana. Roy had been planning this operation for weeks. The Zephyrians had been using the planet's mining facilities to extract rare metals for their war machine. Roy intended to put a stop to that. Roy's team consisted of 50 former miners who had been training as guerrilla fighters. They knew every tunnel and passage in the mining complex. They also knew exactly where to place explosives to cause maximum damage. "The drums are giving us perfect timing," Roy told his second-in-command, a woman named Lisa Cooper who had been a mining supervisor before the war. "The aliens will be too busy dealing with the attacks on New Earth to send reinforcements here." Roy's team moved through the mining tunnels like ghosts. They had painted their faces black and wore dark clothing that made them nearly invisible. In the underground passages, each fighter carried enough explosives to destroy an entire section of the mining facility. The Zephyrian guards in the mining complex were not expecting trouble. They had motion sensors and security cameras, but Roy's people knew how to avoid them. They had been studying the alien security systems for months. When the attack began, it was devastating. Roy's team simultaneously destroyed 6 different mining operations, 3 storage facilities, and the main processing center. The explosions could be heard for kilometers in every direction. But the most important breakthrough was happening in Dr. Amy Walsh's laboratory on New Texas. Amy had been working for weeks on a special project that would change the course of the war. She had discovered something amazing about Zephyrian technology. "Jake, you need to see this," Amy called excitedly as Jake Morrison entered her laboratory. She was standing next to a captured Zephyrian communication device that she had been studying. "I figured out how to inject our drumbeat signal directly into their communication network," Amy explained. "Their computers use frequency patterns just like ours do, but they never thought to protect against this type of interference. Amy had created a computer virus that could make Zephyrian devices broadcast the human drumbeat signal. It was like a technological infection that would spread through their entire communication system." "How long will it take to deploy this virus?" Jake asked. "I can upload it to their network right now," Amy replied. "But once I do, there's no going back. Every Zephyrian device in human space will start playing our drums." Jake thought about the implications. If Amy was right, The psychological impact on the aliens would be enormous. They would not be able to escape the sound of human defiance, even in their own ships and bases. "Do it," Jake decided. Amy typed commands into her computer and uploaded the virus to the Zephyrian network. Within minutes, alien communication devices across dozens of star systems began broadcasting the drumbeat signal. On his flagship orbiting Earth, Supreme Commander Thexaval was reviewing reports when his communication console began playing the human drums. He stared at the device in confusion and anger. "What is happening?" he demanded from his technicians. "Sir, all of our communication equipment is malfunctioning," his chief engineer replied nervously. "We're receiving the same signal on every frequency." Similar scenes were playing out on Zephyrian ships and bases throughout human space. The aliens found themselves surrounded by the sound of human war drums, broadcasting from their own technology. Dr. Kessatar, the alien scientist who had warned about the drumbeat signals, was not surprised. He had tried to tell his superiors that humans were more dangerous than they appeared. Now the evidence was literally playing from every speaker in the Zephyrian fleet. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. The Zephyrians had conquered many species, but they had never encountered an enemy that could turn their own technology against them. The constant drumbeat made it impossible for them to concentrate or communicate effectively. On New Earth, Betty Kane's resistance fighters had successfully destroyed the main Zephyrian communications center. But even better, they could hear the drumbeat signal coming from the aliens' own equipment in other parts of the city. "They can't escape it," Betty told her team as they prepared to withdraw to their hidden base. "No matter where they go, they'll hear our drums." The coordinated attacks continued for 3 days. Every 12 hours, the drumbeat signal would change to indicate new target locations and attack times. The resistance had become a perfectly synchronized fighting force, all coordinated by the rhythm of ancient human war drums. The Zephyrians tried everything to stop the signal. They replaced their communication equipment, but the virus had already spread too far. They tried to jam the frequencies, but the quantum transmitters were too powerful. They even tried to destroy the drumbeat source, but they had no idea where it was coming from. For the first time since the war began, the aliens were afraid. They were fighting an enemy they could not see, could not track, and could not understand. An enemy that had somehow taken control of their own technology and was using it to broadcast the sound of human defiance across the galaxy. The drums had become more than just a signal. They had become a weapon. The protective quantum field around the combined fleets held steady like a bubble of impossibility in the dark of space. Inside this bubble, something wonderful was happening. Ships that had been enemies for millions of years were now working together to create something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Jake Morrison watched through the main screen as alien crews continued to discover what freedom meant. Zephyrian vessels shared their crystal technology with Krallick's bioships. Vorth handcraft opened their geometric processing cores to help solve problems that no single species could handle alone. "Captain, we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy," Lisa Barnes reported from communications. Her voice carried excitement and amazement. "Word is spreading about what happened here. Other fleets are asking questions their governments do not want them to ask." Dr. Rodriguez monitored her instruments as the Chaos engine settled into a new stable pattern. The machine had learned from the experience and was now operating in ways that defied every theory she had ever studied. "The quantum field is holding steady, Captain," she said. "But more importantly, it is teaching itself to exist without our ship. The field is becoming self-sustaining." Commander Alex Turner looked up from his station with wonder in his eyes. "Sir, the alien ships are not just cooperating. They are evolving. Their technology is advancing in directions their original designers never intended." Through the communication channels, they could hear ongoing conversations between species that had been bitter enemies. Young Zephyrian officers were learning Krallick's biological songs. Vorthan processors were creating art with mathematical equations that served no logical purpose except to be beautiful. A new voice joined the communications network. It was Admiral Sarah Cross from Earth Command, her face appearing on the main screen with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "Jake, we are monitoring everything from Earth. What you have accomplished here goes beyond military victory. You have started something that is spreading across the galaxy like wildfire." War Prime Zeltak, his 6 eyes now bright with possibilities he had never imagined, opened a channel to Captain Morrison. The alien leader who had come to destroy humanity now spoke with respect and gratitude. "Captain Morrison, my species spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. We eliminated creativity because we thought it made us weak. Today you have shown us that creativity is the most powerful force in the universe." Jake felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. "War Prime, what will you do now?" Zeltak looked around at his bridge crew, who were experimenting with facial expressions they had never been allowed to make before. "We will do something my people have not done in millennia. We will explore the galaxy, not to conquer it, but to understand it." Admiral Crix of the Kralix appeared on another channel, his biomechanical form showing changes that should have been impossible. New neural pathways glowed under his transparent skull, creating patterns of light that pulsed with curiosity. Human. "Captain, my gene masters designed us to be perfect killing machines, but today my crew discovered something more powerful than any weapon they ever gave us. We discovered the ability to choose mercy over violence." Hierophant 977 of the Vorthan Collective joined the conversation, its geometric form, shifting into new configurations that expressed concepts its language had no words for. "Captain Morrison, our central processing unit programmed us for perfect efficiency, but efficiency without purpose is meaningless. Your species has given us something our creators never considered, the ability to find our own purpose." Dr. Rodriguez watched her readings with scientific fascination. "Captain, the quantum effects are spreading beyond our field. Ships throughout this sector of space are reporting spontaneous creativity in their computer systems. We have created a wave of consciousness that is moving faster than light." The combined fleets began to reorganize themselves in patterns that had never existed before. Instead of military formations designed for conquest, they created configurations based on beauty, curiosity, and mutual support. Ships from different species worked together to solve problems that none of them could handle alone. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks reported from navigation with excitement in his voice. "Sir, we are receiving requests from across the galaxy. Other alien species are asking to meet these awakened fleets. They want to learn about this thing called free will." Commander Patricia Lee looked up from her science station with readings that made no sense according to conventional physics. "Captain, something unprecedented is happening. The quantum field is not just protecting these ships. It is teaching space itself to be more flexible. Reality is becoming more creative in this region of the galaxy." Through the communications network, they could hear the sound of thousands of beings learning to laugh for the first time. Zephyrian crystal voices rang like bells. Kralix biological sounds created harmonies that touched the soul. Vorthan geometric tones added mathematical precision to melodies that no composer had ever written. Captain Morrison watched as the fleet began to disperse across the galaxy. They were no longer 3 separate armies serving distant masters. They had become explorers, teachers, and friends who would carry the gift of human unpredictability to every corner of space. "Captain," Dr. Rodriguez said softly, "the Chaos Engine is showing me something beautiful. The quantum effects we created here will continue to spread. Every ship that encounters these awakened crews will be exposed to the possibility of free thought." Jake nodded, understanding the full magnitude of what they had accomplished. The USS Defiance had faced extinction and responded not with superior firepower, but with something far more dangerous to tyrants. The simple idea that any thinking being could choose to be more than what others expected them to be. Admiral Carter appeared on screen from Earth Command, his weathered face showing pride and amazement. Jake, preliminary reports suggest that governments across the galaxy are experiencing unprecedented challenges. Their perfectly obedient populations are starting to ask questions. War Prime Zelthak opened a final communication to the Defiance before his ship departed for unknown regions of space. Captain Morrison, how can we ever repay this gift you have given us? Jake smiled as he watched Earth grow larger on the view screen. The blue planet looked more beautiful than he had ever seen it before. War Prime, just remember that freedom is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you must choose again every day. The former enemy fleets dispersed in all directions, carrying with them the virus of creativity that would touch every civilization they encountered. Some ships headed for unexplored regions of space. Others returned to their homeworlds to share what they had learned. A few chose to stay near Earth, eager to learn more from the species that had taught them to dream. The USS Defiance had indeed become a warship that even superpowers feared, not because of its weapons, but because of its absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible when conscious minds chose to believe in something greater than themselves. In the years that followed, the galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in deep space, on ships painted with impossible colors and powered by curiosity, former slaves to logic were composing their first symphonies and writing their first poems about the strange, wonderful virus called freedom that had somehow spread from a small blue world to touch the stars themselves. The greatest victory in human history had not been won with guns or bombs, but with the simple act of showing the universe what it meant to be truly alive. 3 months after the Great Defeat, Pete Johnson crawled through a dark tunnel deep beneath the surface of New Montana. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a man to fit through, and water dripped from the rocky ceiling onto his back. Behind him, 6 other humans followed in single file, each carrying a backpack full of supplies. Pete was a mining engineer before the war. He had spent 15 years digging tunnels and extracting rare metals from asteroids and distant planets. He knew how to work underground better than almost anyone alive. Now he was using those skills to fight back against the aliens who had conquered his world. New Montana was a mining colony with a population of 50,000 people. The planet was rich in titanium and other metals that humans needed to build their ships and cities. When the Zephyrians came, they did not destroy the planet. Instead, they landed their own ships and took control of the mines. They wanted the metals for themselves. The aliens thought the human miners would just give up and work for them. They were wrong. Pete and his team reached the end of the tunnel and climbed up through a hidden entrance into an abandoned warehouse. The building had been empty for years, but now it served as a meeting place for the resistance. 20 other humans were already waiting inside, sitting on old boxes and broken machinery. "Did anyone see you coming here?" Pete asked quietly. Everyone shook their heads. They had learned to be very careful. The Zephyrians had sensors that could detect large groups of humans moving together. In the corner of the warehouse sat Dr. Amy Walsh. She was a scientist who had studied alien life forms before the war. When the Zephyrians attacked Earth's moon base, she barely escaped in a small research ship. Now she was the smartest person in the resistance, and everyone looked to her for answers about their enemies. "I have good news and bad news," Amy said, standing up from her chair. She was holding a small device that looked like a broken radio. "The good news is that I figured out how their communication system works. The bad news is that they are much smarter than we thought." Amy had been working for weeks to understand Zephyrian technology. Every time the resistance fighters found pieces of alien equipment, they brought them to her. She took the devices apart and studied how they worked. It was dangerous work because some of the alien technology would explode if handled wrong. "Their computers are at least 200 years ahead of ours," Amy continued. "But they have one weakness. They use quantum encryption for all their messages, which means we might be able to break into their network if we can build the right equipment. A man named Roy Price raised his hand. He had been a soldier in Earth's Special Forces before the war. Roy was 40 years old and had fought in 3 different conflicts before the aliens came. He was teaching the miners and farmers how to be soldiers. "How long will it take to build this equipment?" Roy asked. "Maybe 6 months, if we can find the right parts," Amy replied. "We need quantum processors and crystalline memory cores. The Zephyrians use them in their mining equipment." Pete smiled. "I know where we can find those things. The aliens have been using our old mining facilities. They brought their own equipment, but they are also using some of our machines. If we can get inside the main processing center, we might be able to steal what you need." "That place is heavily guarded," said another voice from the back of the room. It was Claire Dixon, a young engineer who had worked on space stations before the war. She had escaped from Frontier Station Beta when the aliens attacked it. They have at least 50 guards and detection systems everywhere. Claire was only 25 years old, but she was an expert at building and fixing spacecraft. She had been working on converting civilian ships into stealth reconnaissance vessels. The Resistance needed to be able to move around without being detected by Zephyrian sensors. "We don't need to fight our way in," Roy said. "We just need to be smart about it. I have been watching their guard patterns for weeks. They change shifts every 8 hours. There is a 10-minute window when the new guards are getting briefed and the old guards are leaving. That's when we strike." On the other side of the galaxy, another resistance cell was forming on the farming world of New Kansas. Danny Brooks had been a simple farmer before the war. He grew corn and wheat to feed the growing human population. When the Zephyrians came, they destroyed most of the farms and forced the remaining farmers to grow food for their own troops. Danny did not like working for the aliens. He secretly began to organize the other farmers. They started hiding food supplies and weapons in underground storage areas that the aliens did not know about. The resistance on New Kansas was growing stronger every day. Danny's farm was located 50 kilometers from the main Zephyrian base. It was the perfect place to hide supplies that were being moved between different resistance groups. Ships could land in his fields at night and take off before dawn. The aliens never suspected that food shipments were carrying weapons and communication equipment. Back on New Montana, Pete and his team were preparing for their most dangerous mission yet. They needed to break into the main mining facility and steal the quantum processors that Amy needed to build her code-breaking equipment. Roy had spent weeks studying the alien guards. He learned their routines and figured out when they were most vulnerable. The Zephyrians were confident that humans could not threaten them, so they were not as careful as they should have been. "Remember, we get in fast and get out faster," Roy told the team. "We need those processors, but not if it means getting everyone killed. If something goes wrong, abort the mission and run." Amy was working in her secret laboratory, which was hidden deep in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath New Montana's capital city. She had been trying to reverse engineer Zephyrian technology for months. Every small breakthrough gave her hope that humans could fight back effectively. The laboratory was filled with broken alien devices and human computers that she had modified to work with the alien technology. Wires and circuits covered every surface. The air smelled like burned electronics and metal polish. Amy's biggest discovery was that the Zephyrians used sound waves in their computers. Their technology was based on frequency patterns rather than the electrical signals that humans used. If she could figure out the right frequencies, she might be able to send false signals to their equipment. But she needed more advanced components to build a transmitter powerful enough to reach multiple Zephyrian ships. That's why Pete's mission was so important. Without those quantum processors, her research would be useless. Claire was in another part of the city, working on modifying a cargo ship that the Resistance had captured. The ship needed to be able to avoid Zephyrian sensors while carrying supplies between different worlds. She was installing a new stealth system that would make the ship invisible to most alien detection equipment. "If this works, we can start moving larger groups of people and heavier weapons," Claire told her assistant, a young mechanic named Bobby Chen. "The aliens won't even know we're there." As the months passed, the Resistance grew stronger. More Humans joined the fight. They learned to communicate using coded messages that the aliens could not understand. They built hidden bases in caves and abandoned buildings. They started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win this war. But they needed something more than just weapons and technology. They needed a way to coordinate their attacks across multiple worlds. They needed a signal that could reach every human in the galaxy. Pete finished loading his backpack with explosives and cutting tools. Tomorrow night, he and his team would break into the most heavily guarded facility on New Montana. It was dangerous, but it was also necessary. The underground resistance was about to take its biggest risk yet. Captain Jake Morrison gripped the metal rail on the bridge of the UES Liberty as explosions lit up the darkness around them. His ship shook with each blast from the enemy weapons. Through the thick glass windows, he could see human ships being destroyed one by one. The Zephyrian fleet was winning, and everyone knew it. Jake was 35 years old and had been fighting in space for 12 years. He had never seen anything like this before. The alien ships were bigger, faster, and stronger than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could cut through human armor like it was made of paper. Their shields could stop the biggest missiles humans could fire at them. "Captain, we just lost the USS Eagle," reported his second in command, Lieutenant Sam Davis. The young man's voice was shaking. "That makes 23 ships destroyed in the last hour." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. 23 ships meant thousands of dead humans. Good people who had families waiting for them back on Earth and the colonies. People who thought they were fighting to protect their homes and their children. The war had started 6 months ago when the Zephyrians first entered human space. They came from a distant part of the galaxy that humans had never explored. At first, human leaders tried to talk with them. They sent messages of peace and friendship. They offered to share technology and trade goods. The Zephyrians answered with laser fire. Their ships appeared over Earth's biggest cities without warning. They destroyed 3 space stations before anyone could react. Then they sent a simple message in perfect English: "Surrender now, or die." Humans chose to fight. It was the wrong choice. Jake watched another human ship explode in the distance. The USS Phoenix had been one of the newest ships in the fleet. It had taken 5 years to build and cost more money than some planets made in a decade. The Zephyrians destroyed it in less than 10 seconds. "Sir, Admiral Carter is sending a message. To all ships," Sam said. His fingers moved quickly over the control panel. "Putting it on the main screen now." The face of Admiral Lisa Carter appeared on the bridge's biggest screen. She was 50 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. Jake had served under her for 8 years and had never seen her look so defeated. "All human ships. This is Admiral." "Carter?" she said. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the pain in it. "Our position is no longer sustainable. We have lost 70% of our fleet. The enemy has us surrounded on all sides." Jake felt his heart sink. He had known things were bad, but not that bad. "I am ordering all remaining ships to execute. Protocol 7 immediately," the Admiral continued. "Fall back to the outer colonies and prepare for guerrilla operations. We cannot win this fight today, but this war is not over. Repeat, this war is not over." Protocol 7 was the military's secret plan for what to do if Earth and the main colonies were lost. It meant splitting up the remaining ships and hiding them in distant star systems. It meant giving up on trying to fight the enemy in big battles, and instead using hit-and-run attacks. It meant admitting defeat. Jake turned to his crew. There were 48 people on his ship. Most of them were young, barely out of training. They looked scared and confused. Some of them were crying. "You heard the Admiral," Jake said. "Sam, set course for the Haven system. Maximum speed." "Yes, sir," Sam replied. He started typing commands into his computer. On the main screen, Admiral Carter's ship, the UES Valiant, was fighting 5 Zephyrian vessels at once. The human ship was firing everything it had, but the enemy shields were too strong. The Zephyrian Ships moved around the Valiant like sharks circling their prey. "Admiral Carter's ship is taking heavy damage," reported Jake's weapons officer, Corporal Jenny Hill. "Her shields are down to 20%. Jake watched helplessly as the enemy ships focused all their fire on the Valiant. The Admiral's ship tried to run, but it was too late. A massive explosion lit up the screen, and then there was nothing left but floating metal and debris. Admiral Lisa Carter was dead. The woman who had led the human fleet for 15 years was gone. The ship that had protected Earth and its colonies was destroyed. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "All ships. This is Captain Morrison of the UES Liberty," Jake said into his radio. He was now the highest-ranking officer left alive. "Continue with Protocol 7. Get to the outer systems any way you can. Stay hidden. Stay alive. We will fight another day." The retreat was chaos. Human ships scattered in all directions like frightened birds. Some headed toward the mining colonies near the edge of human space. Others went to the farming worlds that the government had built to feed the growing population. A few tried to reach the research stations that studied new planets and alien life. The Zephyrians let them go. Jake realized they were not even trying to chase the fleeing human ships. To them, the war was already over. They had won. The remaining humans were just insects running away to die somewhere else. Jake's ship jumped to hyperspace just as the last human defense station around Earth exploded. Through the swirling lights of the hyperspace tunnel, he could see Earth in the distance. The blue and green planet that had been humanity's home for millions of years was now under alien control. The jump to hyperspace took 6 hours. During that time, Jake sat in his captain's chair and thought about what had happened. The human race had spread to 50 different worlds. They had built cities among the stars and created technologies that their grandparents could never have imagined. They thought they were ready to defend themselves against anything. They were wrong. The Zephyrians were not just stronger than humans. They were better at everything. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of human science. Their ships could travel faster and fight harder. Their weapons could destroy entire planets if they wanted to. But there was something the aliens did not understand about humans, something they would learn too late. When the UES Liberty dropped out of hyperspace near the Haven system, Jake called his crew together in the main meeting room. They were tired and scared, but they were still alive. They were still human. "I know you think we lost," Jake told them. "I know it looks like the war is over, but you're wrong. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning." He looked at each face in the room. These people had trusted him to lead them through the worst day in human history. Now he had to give them hope for tomorrow. "The enemy thinks they won," Jake continued. "They think we're finished. They're about to learn something about the human race that they should have known before they started this war." Jake smiled for the first time since the battle began. "They're about to learn that humans never give up.